Heckle him.
I told him I was going to heckle him.
It's kind of appropriate. So hi everyone. Like Alice's talk, this talk also does feature a penis. The first person to spot it gets a drink. So I'd like to start with a quick reminder, and it's hopefully something that you all know. It's something that's pretty fundamental to being human, and it's this. You're all going to die someday.
Hey.
And relatively speaking, you're all going to die pretty soon. Now I'm not saying that to scare you, though it is scary. I'm saying that because it's important. To face the fact that we're going to die, being reminded of our own mortality is powerful. Death can be a force for good. The Romans knew it. They created this concept called Memento Mori, which stands for remember that you have to die. It was originally reserved for triumphant generals. When they got back from a victory, a triumphant battle, they'd have a parade. And during this parade, a slave would stand behind them saying, remember, you're going to die soon. Remember that you're just a man. And I'm going to be talking about this concept of Memento Mori. And I'm going to do a brief overview of its history in art, but also talk about how it can be used in games. So this is a medieval example of Memento Mori. And this was the Ars Moriendi, and this was a guide in how to die properly, basically. And this was made 60 years after the Black Death. And medieval artists were pretty obsessed with that. They had a church that was telling them that sin and religion and what happened to you after you die is really important. So there's not just the Ars Moriendi, there are things like the Dance of Death, which was here to remind you that despite your worldly glories, despite everything you achieve in your life, actually it's meaningless. You're going to go to heaven, God is going to judge you. You then had the vanities. The vanities were a Dutch and Netherlands sort of artist-inspired thing. And they had a lot of similar motifs. So skulls are the most obvious, and there are a lot of skulls in this talk, in case you haven't noticed already. Over 150 of them, I think. But they also had motifs like flowers and timepieces. So they're there to remind you that you're going to die someday. With the vanitas in particular, we can see how Memento Mori came to have prominence in modern life. We might be less obsessed with the battle between the spiritual and the earthly, but death still scares the fuck out of us. So this is a recent example of Memento Mori. This is someone created a countdown clock, which counted every day they've got left if they lived an average life. Another modern example that I particularly love is this. So this is a deck of cards for every year that someone lives. At the end of each week, because conveniently decks of cards have 52 cards in them, same as the amount of weeks in a year, they move a card from the left to the right. And it's a nice chance to reflect and meditate on their life and the fact of how far they've lived. But Memento Mori don't just have to be objects, they can also be places. So while I was preparing for this talk, I went for a walk around Abney Park Cemetery, which is around the corner from me. And Abney Park Cemetery is an amazing place. So it was saved from going into ruin by a group of local volunteers who got it designated as a nature reserve. So, and when you go there, it's 1 degree colder than the rest of London. It's shadowed by trees that block out the noise of the city. It's peaceful. Most of the graves are sunken. Most of the statues have missing limbs, missing heads. And it's all wrapped up in this tangle of plant life. Some days, if you're lucky, you might see a parakeet flying around. They were supposedly released by Jimi Hendrix. And this is the point. Life teems around reminders of death. On my walk, I saw a young boy digging in sandy earth with a stick that he was using as a pickaxe. I saw a couple kissing at the gates. I saw people rolling joints, a girl deciding which way to go by spinning around and just going whichever way she ended up facing. And best of all, I saw a load of really, really good dogs. It's a good example of how death can anchor life, how it can inspire us. And it felt like everyone that was there had this same feeling, this same revelation. So what about games? How can games help us reflect on death? And in doing so, inspire us? So one obvious route is through art. And I don't really want to talk about this too much, but there are some similarities between game art and the art of people in medieval era. And Game art is renowned for being really, really subtle with its themes. Especially like when modders get involved. I mean, look at that costume. But sometimes they do things subtly. Like, so this is a quest in Skyrim called Memento Mori, and it actually repeats some of those themes from the vanities pages. But actually I'd like to talk more about mechanics. And one obvious route for this seems to be in divination. It's a kind of game with a long legacy through our society, from Viking runes to tarot to Ouija boards. They often feature in our lives as acts of meditation, guided by randomness. We interpret the side of a die, the draw of a card, the flow of a game, and hope to learn something about death, about ourselves. One of the most interesting variants is when people modify existing games. So there's often people throughout the medieval period modifying games of chess and using chess to work out things about their life. There's an interesting one that I saw recently where Matty Bryce had set up a game of Netrunner to tell herself about life. So she assigned each Netrunner card, after she'd set it up, a tarot card to match it. And by doing a run through the game, she learned things about the characters and about herself. There's also this, which is the Larklamp. It's designed to be a games console that could have existed 3,000 years ago. And the way it works is there's a lamp in the middle and there's sides that you put in, and the sides project onto the table. There's one game for it called Glimmer Mill. And Glimmer Mill is designed to be a divination game. Throughout the game, you roll dice, you put counters down, and at the end, you read the pattern to get the fortune. Structuring meaning from randomness is a really powerful way that games can talk about death. Humans are good at seeing patterns in things, and these kinds of games allow us to do that. So other games have picked up on this, especially video games. They systemize this randomness to tell stories. There are games like RimWorld, The Quiet Year, and Crusader Kings that all use random mechanics that allow us to create stories with them. And I'd like to talk about Crusader Kings a little bit. So a common theme in Memento Mori is this idea of death as a great leveler. Whatever power and glory you gain in life, time will eventually wipe out. So the poem Ozymandias by Shelley is a great example of this. The story of the discovery of a statue in a desert, a ruler whose works are long forgotten, a ruler whose name is only known because it's etched at the base of the statue. And like Ozymandias' folly, video games allow us to live out our own follies. And here's one of mine. So I play a lot of Crusader Kings 2, and I once decided to start a game driven by a pun, and the pun was around Great Brittany. So I took the nation of Brittany and decided to conquer the entire nation of Britain and create Great Brittany. It's not a very good pun. And I was doing well. I had a succession of kings and queens, some excellent, some a bit mediocre, and I conquered Ireland, I conquered Wales, I conquered Scotland. I even managed to take some land off France. And as I started taking England, that's when things went wrong. First, my heir, groomed from birth to rule, died, shortly followed by my ruler. And then when my ruler died, I looked at who the next heir was, and they unfortunately had a trait which is in the game is called slow. And the slow trait is really, really bad. It decimates your stats, it makes everyone hate you. But I held it together. Like, there was a load of rebellions, but I kept the kingdom together for about 2 years, and then he died. So Crusader Kings 2 has a genetic system. Some traits can be passed down through generations, and I realised that this branch of the family all had the slow trait. So every time I inherited, it would just go to one of them. My heir, 6 years old, when he took the throne, was basically deposed within a couple of months. And the thing was, he was deposed by an uncle that wasn't very good. So I got to watch, just owning one little county, as my uncle proceeded to make the kingdom fall apart. It's like England became England, Ireland became Ireland. And I just watched in horror as this thing that I built fell apart. And we've all got stories like this. If you played a game, you have a story like this. We've all spent hours building a fort in Minecraft to have one creeper come along and blow it up. Or spent hours building a character in an RPG to just have one unlucky roll kill them. But this is what games teach us. Games are cruel and they're capricious and they don't love us. They don't really care about us. They're just systems And systems do what they're told. And the thing you learn is that if things go badly, you just have to pick yourself up and go again. A unique way that games can exploit that is through repetition. Again, Super Hexagon says to you when you fail. And 30 seconds later, when you fail again, it's again. 30 seconds later, again. Over and over and over. You pick yourself up, start again, fail, and learn. And that's a bit like life, right? You might never defeat the boss, you might never get to the end of the level, but you keep going and you keep trying until you can't try anymore. And I think Limbo is a fantastic example of this. And it's this fantastic example of failure and repetition. We guide this boy through this grey-black landscape filled with deadly traps, and under our stewardship, the boy dies over and over in some pretty gruesome ways. And we feel attached to the boy. We feel attached to him because we have a responsibility for his survival, but often the only way forward is to die. The only way that we can learn is to actually fail. And in the repetition of failure in games, we learn something about the patterns of life and the importance of persistence. So what about narrative?
Yes.
Well done, Alan. Was that Alan? No.
Yeah, it's Alan.
That sounded like Alan. Well done. I really drink. So, I wanted to know how games could explore death through narrative. And I recently read a book called, there is a reason for the penis, I recently read a book called The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And in this book it explores the murder of a college student who's killed by his friends, and it explores why they did it and the effect it has on them. And one of the reasons it's really powerful is that it lingers on grief and how it affects people. It lingers on the unexpected reactions caused by that grief. The murder of the student sits like a stone on the pages, making every word heavy. And I can't think of a game that does that. Sure, there are games with iconic deaths, and sometimes it's tearful, especially when it's a party member. But those deaths aren't used that interesting. So I recently played Telltale's Game of Thrones game, and like the books, it does use death like literally throughout. Everyone dies, basically. If you get attached to someone, they die. But it never feels as meaningful or as heartrending as in the books or TV shows. It just doesn't achieve that. And there are a few reasons for this. But the one that I'd like to focus on is grief. Games just do not get grief. They only use it in one way. It never carries through the game itself. After a character dies, there might be an occasional mention of them. But after their death, it really has the same weight on the world. The narrative, the mechanics, that the death of another piece of fiction has. They use it in this one way, which is to steal the character's resolve. It's often the motive for revenge. It's the motive to finish the final act. And for once, I'd like to see people falling apart in games. I'd like to see characters breaking. I'd like to see characters struggling, or just acting in really weird ways because someone has died. So, remember that someday you're going to die, and that's okay. Between now and then, you might spend some of that time playing video games, and that's okay too. They might help you understand that, and they might help you understand your life. And they might not as well. They might just be fun, they might just be a diversion, and that's okay, because every day is a triumph, and I just want to congratulate you all on getting so far. Well done.
It's not a fashion cut.
I don't know. Does anyone, what's the
I
word?
want to say something, if I may.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed your presentation immensely, but I came in here so happy, but now I'm not too sure, because
Well, I do have a nice gift at the end.
I'm just touching 73, and I'm thinking I haven't got much left.
On the other hand, she's got
Sorry.
a high score of all of us.
Well done, yeah. So I do have a nice cat gift at the end, but if anyone photosensitive.